Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Mowing After Dark here on the College Football Mafia Network. I promise 100% less wieners tonight. We now have the Bowen protection in effect. Somebody might come on here and yell on the mic or something, but you will not have to put up with seeing their floppy wiener. I want to thank
Yeah,
everybody for
no
coming
pigs and
in.
blankets on this show. The Super Bowl's over.
That's right. Thank you, everybody, for coming in to join us this Sunday night. We're going to talk a little college football, enjoy ourselves, have fun. How are you doing tonight, Rock?
I'm doing good. It's like doesn't really happen out here that much, but you know those like days in March out east or in the colder climates where it's like seems like it's supposed to be warm, but it's cold. Like the sun's bright, but it's cold. It's like one of those kind of days today, which is like an interesting, nice day to have out here. So I appreciate the things you missed, but other than that, pretty cool, man. No private equity invested in me this week, so I'm just paying attention to everybody else.
Yeah, I did not get a private capital deal either. I wanted a private capital deal for my birthday. I was ready to sell all my intellectual property rights. I couldn't get a box of Cracker Jacks for them on the open market. So it is what
I
it
thought
is.
Rock and Rant would be and Mowing After Dark would be worth more than like some G5 schools, but apparently not.
Bottle of Night Train. That was the best offer I got, was a bottle of Night Train. Let's say hello to some people who came in here early. Stormy Cyclone says, hi, guys. Nice Cardinal. Thank you, Stormy Cyclone. Ryan Willie says, hi, College Football Mafia. Good to see you, Ryan.
What's up, Ryan?
He'll watch later. He might have a Brewers game or something going on tonight. Hey, y'all. Guns up from the 806 from John Dry. Bob Swanger says, hey, CFM. Good to see you, Bob. Big Ears Bo, any ideas which university is holding this up? I know WVU is all in and ready to go. I can only tell you what I know, Bo, and Kansas was one of the holdouts the last time I knew. But basically, think of anybody who maybe has a shot at a power 2 slot, which is pretty much Kansas and then it kind of descends after that. But Kansas is the only one I was for sure was a no on it, but that was probably 8 weeks ago. I don't know if that's the case anymore. Illini Ted says ILL and has what the British call an aubergine. I assume that's to represent something. Caleb Ramirez is here. He says, hi, everyone. Good to see you, Caleb Ramirez. BYU football Shonsky is here. He says, hi, everyone. Good to see everybody on this first show of the month of March. Hope everybody's enjoying the weather. It was a little cold here today in Ohio, but it wasn't bad. There was no snow, so I will take it. Coy says, hi, all. Good to see you, Coy. Clint Moses says, what's up? Good to see you, Clint Moses. All right. So let's get down to it. We'll talk a little bit. It's the main thing I put on the thumbnail. I think it's still a big enough story that we can continue to cover it. Big 12, close to a deal on private capital with Redbird Capital to inject potentially up to $1 billion with a B into the Big 12 conference. We talked a lot about it on Thursday and Friday nights, Rock, but I know you weren't there. I want to get your opinion on this. What do you think? You're an ACC. You're not an ACC guy. You've got a team that's in the ACC.
ACC. Yeah, I mean, to me, there's two majorly interesting stories on there. One, it's just like what happens with the Big 12 and this deal, and how long is it required for the capital infusion, not the equity. No one's losing their football facility if the deal goes south, right? Especially state institutions. So I think the origin story of where things come confuses the conversation at times, but they're basically, sometimes you need money to make money, right? And that's essentially what this is. All these schools are making money, but they're not making enough money to really exploit everything, and they could use some partners because like their ad sales guy is just not good enough to go broad and national. So I'm curious about that, and I'm curious on the whether Redbird does in fact do something and acquires what is Paramount Plus and that right now. And is that the issue, right? Because maybe they're already thinking about triangulating everything and that might take a few more years for a TV deal to be open to them. So maybe that's why they might want it longer, and people like Kansas or whoever might hold out. Second part, to me, more separately interesting is I know you've talked about it and Greg's talked about it on Peek Around the Corner. There was the first thing that jumped out to me when this got out was just strengthened Florida State and Clemson's leveraging ability to negotiate a settlement, should they want to negotiate a settlement, as has been reported, because the clock just moved up, probably several months, if not longer, in a lot of people's minds, whether they were right or wrong to have that perception of who might be the first one to cut a deal for private capital infusion. At least I think that's the perception that was out there, and this obliterates that, right? It's entirely possible that the Big 12 signs a deal before we even get to a hearing date for the House settlement. So we shall see. And it'd be even more interesting if they don't sign a deal now that this is leaked. If it was a pressure play and that doesn't happen because Kansas is a holdout or something. So I don't know. That's kind of my take. I saw a little bit of your show on Thursday. I didn't really see the guys get together on Friday. Kind of where do you stand on it right now?
I think this is a masterstroke by Brett Yormark. Whether it happens or not, just putting the news out there puts instability in the ACC. I think especially for teams that are, I hate to use the term, we're in the midst of March. We're getting ready for March Madness, but bubble teams. What about these bubble teams in the ACC? What about your Louisville, your Virginia Tech, your Pitt, your Syracuse? Schools that probably would not have a home in the Power 2 have to be looking at this now and saying, whoa, wait a second. The Big 12 is now going to be ahead of us for how many years in terms of being able to max revenue share, all these new revenue streams, and we're still capped because we can't get a capital deal done because we're locked in the courts with Florida State and Clemson. So, I think it adds instability in those programs in particular. Again, you're right. Florida State and Clemson, this news came out, and it's a huge boost of leverage for them. And I mentioned it on Thursday. Put on your tinfoil caps, people. Redbird is in a partnership with Drew Weatherford and Weatherford Capital. They are partners in the collegiate athletic solutions. That's been discussed several times. Tried to do that kind of private capital stuff into college football. It makes me wonder because Drew Weatherford is also a trustee of Florida State.
Right.
Is Weatherford Capital involved in this Redbird deal? Or is this Redbird exclusively separately from their joint venture with Weatherford Capital doing this on their own?
Yeah, it's definitely a big question. And I think the other part that I think sometimes, this is my take. I'm curious as to what yours is. Everyone will sit there and say, well, this doesn't mean anything because tomorrow the Big Ten and the SEC could do their own private equity deal and the gap will expand. Yes, in theory, for a temporary period of time, it's about, it brings you closer, if this were to happen sooner, to anybody else who does not have a deal there to mitigate the difference on the media rights deal. But it's more about you have a certain amount of costs to cover, right? And you have very little leeway to do that. So you're trying to put yourselves distance, not from like catching up to the Big Ten and the SEC, but being able to afford to run your programs correctly and to put distance between others that are also struggling. So you're in a better position than a Wake Forest and NC State, any of those kind of things, right? Ultimately, there's like two factors. We have to pay our bills. We don't want to cut sports. We want to go to 100, X amount of scholarships. We like to not be like running on a razor thin margin. And maybe these guys can unlock 2 to 3x value out of our IP that we can't do despite having a staff already.
Yeah, again, I mentioned it on Friday and Thursday. This whole private capital deal, it's not going to get the Big 12 on par with the Big 10 and the SEC. That race is over. The Big 10 and the SEC have won, at least for the foreseeable future. But it gets you in front of the ACC. And let's be honest, the Big 12 and the ACC are much closer competitors than the Big 12 and the Big 10 or the Big 12 and the SEC or the ACC and the SEC, ACC and Big Ten. Now, I think the ACC still had an advantage because they had power teams in that conference. They had some blue bloods or close to new bloods. You had Miami, who have, I'm correct, has 5 national championships.
Correct.
Florida State, who has
3.
4?
3.
3? Okay.
3.
Clemson, who now has 4, I believe. I believe 3 with Dabo and 1 in 1981. Might have been 2 with Dabo. I take that back.
Yeah, I think it's 2. I think it's 2 with Dabo, but you could be right too.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got schools in there. You've still got brand name schools in the conference. I think that puts the ACC. Plus, they make a little more. That'll go down because the deal is not necessarily backloaded for the ACC. That'll go down when the Big 12 keeps moving forward, but the ACC's in front right now. It might just be by a nose, by a hair. They're in front. Private equity comes into the Big 12. It's going to push. It's going to push the ACC behind. They're going to lap them. If you're a team in the ACC, what are your solutions?
They have to get their act together, right? They have to be able to come back and counter and match. And though any particular team can try to go out and get an individual private equity deal, they're not in a position to do a full conference deal because I don't know where I've heard this, but economic factors that create instability and uncertainty are not good for the economy, right? Including a conference's economy. So, if they want to do this, they got to figure out what they want to do with Florida State and Clemson, right? And maybe if it was a harder conversation, maybe it makes it easier to get them down to 2031, if that's been something like that. But this is probably and coupled with Florida State at least getting a positive court ruling in Tallahassee, the Supreme Court there in Florida, keeping that case theoretically alive, regardless of whether they're having separate conversations. It was probably either through luck or plan the strongest week that Florida State has had in a while, alongside with Clemson, in terms of leverage positions versus the conference, even if you're trying to settle.
Yeah, I think at this point the ACC, I think they need to go to mediation with Clemson and Florida State.
Right.
Whether Florida State and Clemson want to do that, that's another story entirely.
Another story altogether.
If this comes in at $1 billion, which is, I don't know, that's what was projected. In the various reports I've read, it could be upwards of $1 billion. You break that down per school, that's a lot of money. A lot of money. And you're right. Individual schools can go out there on the individual marketplace and sell their own intellectual property rights to capital investment, things that do not currently belong to anybody else. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to get more on a conference capital deal than you are for an individual school. You also, with a conference capital deal, the conference is actually taking most of the risk, not the individual institutions. You do that as an individual institution. Let's say North Carolina goes out and forms Carolina Blue Capital Trust Partners with CWC. They're going to have to take some of that risk on board themselves as a public university. I don't think the public schools want to do that.
Moen, from what you've heard, and you may not have heard anything on this part, but if let's say the Big 12 deal does come to pass and it is $1 billion, the reason why the Big 12 is getting that is the collection of the value of all of the brands within the Big 12. But all the Big 12 brands are not valued the same. So does this just become another version of unequal revenue sharing, or because it's a conference deal? Are we back in the same cycle here, right? Where I know the Big 12 hasn't necessarily gone down the road that the ACC has, but if private equity, private capital more specifically comes in, is it basically X amount of money divided by Y amount of teams equally? Or do you think it's going to be relative to the brand strength and value?
That's a great question. I'd have to think with the amount of smaller teams in the Big 12 that it would have to be equal. I'm sure Kansas, Colorado, BYU, Utah probably wouldn't like that. They probably have a little higher. Arizona State, obviously, coming off a playoff game. Arizona with its basketball brand. I mean, there's, but I think the only way you can do it and make it feasible and make it palatable for everybody, or at least the vast majority of people, you have to do it as an equal share.
Right. And then it gets back to the same thing that Florida State and Clemson are going to be kicked off of, right? Because if you're Florida State, unequivocally, their brand is massively bigger than Wake Forest. No disrespect to Wake Forest as an institution. And even in a 2-10 year, I want to say the Florida State eyeball wise in football was around $1.5 million, maybe. And I want to say Wake Forest and SMU were like 250, 300,000 viewers per game. So 5x in terms of value on like their worst season that I think is in my lifetime. So how does that trickle down and impact the negotiations for any pending? We want to get this deal done because we want to get a private equity deal done on the back of having a success initiative and a brand initiative already in the ACC.
That's a great question. And the thing is, that question can't be answered till the lawsuits are settled.
Right.
And the two schools that are going to be most adamant about unequal revenue share are the two that are suing the conference. So,
Well, I think there's a third one, a third and fourth one that will be there. When it comes to this zone of the equation, like you got North Carolina for sure, and Miami's now president was the head of Deloitte, who also, ironically, their new division might be the ones in charge of regulating all the NIL contacts. So, like that's his background comes from that entire private equity operation that Deloitte ran.
Yeah,
or worked with private equity partners that they did they were their service provider for aspects of running their business.
Yeah, you've got 2 schools in open revolt, and you've probably got 3 or 4 schools in quiet revolt in the ACC. But the ones you really need to worry about are the ones in open revolt. So
correct.
Should be interesting. Let's get back to some comments here. Figure out where it left off. Here we go. FF18 buffs, Fergie. SCO buffs. Power 3 coming. Buffs are ready to lead.
I think the buffs are a big part of it, but leading, I think that's not. I don't think I've seen anything from like that athletic department that like indicates leading in this. Like if they have, I don't even know. I could be wrong. Buffs, maybe they have more power within the Big 12 than I've heard to date.
Well, they should right now. I mean, they're basically, again, you can watch your videos on the channel. Colorado's ratings compared to the average of the Big 12 are through the roof. Right. People are still entranced by Coach Prime. So as long as he's there, those ratings are going to continue to be high. And they get featured a lot on Fox over the air nationwide.
But I think, I think it was like 3 million this year, so I'm not taking away from Colorado's ratings. It was very clear tier 1, and then there's a big gap beneath them. But the difference with a lot of the other brands, and unknown for Colorado, is other brands survive coaching changes, and the brand is still the brand. So, like, how much does that impact their ability to lead if you don't know like what would happen the day after? But even though we don't know, the day after might be for years for all we know.
Very true. But in the interim, you got to wonder, Colorado's out there in front. Are they ones to want to take this private equity deal and have some kind of long-term commitment to the Big 12? They could be a potential Big 10 candidate. We talked about it a little bit on Friday. The Big 10 probably isn't done expanding out west. Might be 1, it might be 2. Colorado might be vying for one of those spots. Devil Frog is here. Leave the cannoli, take the gun. Big 12 to your mark.
An appropriate quote on Oscar Day.
That's true. And trust me, Ray Ormark looks like he could stand to eat a cannoli. Did anyone else watch the USC-UCLA women's basketball game? I did not.
I did not get to see it. I heard a little bit about it. Juju.
The Big Lubbock says hello. Good to see you, Big Lubbock. Line Ted says, I think the biggest question is how does one get out of a PE deal with a conference? Is it like a second Gore? This is a great question, Line Ted. Nobody knows because nobody's done it yet.
Yeah, it also depends. I would guess it depends upon like how that money is rolled out, right? If you're being given money by year, then I don't think it's problematic. If there's like conference-wide initiatives that you benefit from, like it's just like how does it get structured year by year versus like a block? Is there a big ass part of it that's front-loaded to help get things off the ground that will last years with the anticipation that you as a member would still be there?
Very true. And keep in mind, too, the way this was explained to me, this is an intellectual property rights deal. They basically would go out and make money with the intellectual property rights, and then they would take a cut from that money. Would be 10, 15, 20%, and the rest of that would be fed back into the Big 12.
For sure. And one thing, this is something I have like past experience with. I know everyone's like, well, why don't the schools just go do a lot of those deals themselves? I've worked in this area for a big ass company and dealt with professional sports teams and college sports teams with strategic stuff, and they just aren't resourced. They're just not staffed that way. Some of them are, right? Some of them are. I'm not talking about Notre Dame, Ohio State, but most of them, do not have necessarily the depth of the department or the cross-industry relationships to leverage things where somebody else has that proverbial old school Rolodex contact list and digital era that those people just don't have yet. It's just not where they're at.
Yeah, we've started to see the kind of boom of the GM/AD slot opening up here recently. Ross Bjork at Ohio State. You brought up Pete Bavacqua at Notre Dame. These guys who have network connections, have these deep connections throughout the country. And, somebody asked the question last week, well, why doesn't the Big 12 just go out and sell those intellectual property rights themselves? Because they're not equipped to. Private capital is equipped to. They know people. They can go in New York and say, hey, I want to set up a meeting with this person or this company. Or they could get Allstate Insurance and say, hey, Allstate, we want to talk to you about naming rights. Yeah, the Big 12 could do that. But when private capital is involved, I think they could do it better. And I think the Big 12 would still make more money off of it. Carla Jenkins says she is very leery of PE. Well, thank you for stopping in, Carla Jenkins. I see your comments all the time. We do appreciate you here on the College Football Mafia. Glad you could catch a live show.
I had a really bad gym teacher once, too. I was very leery of him.
Whoa, mowing without a hat. I could put a hat on if it makes you happy, Joseph. Here we go. For Joseph, I'll put the hat on. Drew Weatherford has a partnership with Playfly Sports, though. I don't know about Playfly. He does have one with Redbird Capital. They formed their own company. It's a joint venture with them and Weatherford Capital. It's called Collegiate Athletic Solutions, CAS.
That's a total private equity kind of name. Yes. As vague and generic as possible.
Sterling Cooper Draper Price. I disagree with you. The Big 12 can still compete with the SEC and the Big 10. On the field, I don't disagree with you. I think there's going to be teams in the Big 12 that can compete with SEC and Big 10 teams. But in terms of the media arms race, they can't. It comes down to the markets they're in, guys. It comes into the markets and who the advertisers want to target. They want to be in Big 10 country. They want to be in SEC country. They want to be on the West Coast.
Right. If you took a school that is been underperforming ratings-wise in the Big 12 and a lot of the ACC with a few exceptions, and they had an epic run and they 10x their ratings, they still would be winding up more towards the lower end of some of the Big 10 schools.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's not necessarily about how many people are watching your games. It's about who those people are that are watching your games. Advertising is sold based on demographics. So advertisers would much rather have a million viewed game, a game of 1 million viewers, and all million of those viewers were in their key demographic than a 10 million viewer game with 100,000 people in their key demographic.
Yeah.
So,
like golf ad rates over index, not because they get bigger ratings, but because the people are trying to advertise to the people who do watch golf and who they think their pockets are and what those customers are worth to them, are willing to pay more to get in front of them relative to the audience size. The ads aren't necessarily more expensive overall than an NFL game or anything like that, and they definitely don't get the audience, but per thousand CPM, they're pretty good.
yeah, it's more about reaching the people with the most disposable income. Like you said, golf's a great example of it. Golf is a sport that's usually enjoyed by people who have a lot of disposable income. Moen, everyone still has to show their value, and so deadweight teams in either of the P2 have to be examined as worthy, so sticking with lesser watched programs is a risk. I'm sorry, Fergie, that's not the case with the Big Ten. We're not leaving anybody behind.
And eventually, it's just no matter which way you go down that road, if you keep going to that kind of model, eventually there's like one team left because somebody's always the lowest ranked team, lowest audience team, right? You have to have like membership, right?
Yeah.
You have to have players, and today's like studs could be your bottom dwellers if you're down to 32.
Yeah, and the thing is, even like Purdue fans, Purdue had a terrible season this year, but Purdue fans just didn't watch Purdue. They would tune in and watch. Big Ten fans tend to watch Big Ten football, even if they're games that are not very good games. We will sit through them. Anybody can remind you of the great years of the Big Ten West Division, with Iowa versus Illinois in a 12-9 duel. That somehow got massive rating. So, Illini Ted, it seems like a PE conference contract would need renegotiated if teams leave or join. I'm curious if it would just be a lot of money owed by leaving teams, or would other rights be involved? That's a great question, Ted. I don't have all the answers on this. My guess is there wouldn't be any rights involved per team because it's based on the conference. The Big 12 would be selling intellectual property rights of the Big 12 conference, not individual rights of like Kansas or Colorado or Texas Tech.
Yeah. Here's the one thing I can pretty much think that nobody's going to do, even if they're in the Big 10 or SEC. No one is going to lock themselves into a 10 or 20-year contract ever again. Right? No one's going to like try to, think that everything's going to be even. No one wants to sign the private equity, private capital version of the ACC ESPN deal.
Yeah, I don't disagree. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Okay, we got 200 people viewing. It's my birthday, but I'm going to give away some gifts right now. It's the beginning of the month. We've got some free memberships to give out, and we're going to gift some now. And I got the Kellys, Keith Moore, Cougar, Don in Kansas, Michael Tamez, Steven Schur. You were all gifted memberships to the College Football Mafia family. Just to let you guys know that I believe you was recording tonight a new video going into private equity, going into private capital, a little more in depth, and that'll be available to our members early this week. So definitely check it out. I think you will enjoy it.
And if you're watching over on Twitter, jump over, give us a like, subscribe, and be in the chat room over here on YouTube side, and you could potentially get a membership gifted either by the channel or by a kind member who gifts one forward.
Absolutely. And I will open it up. We'll do open lines a little later. I'll put the Wiener blind of justice up, and
we're looking for private equity capital or an NIL deal to sponsor the Wiener Hotline.
Clint Moses, has Big 12 hired GMs in any sports? That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head because that's more of a team. You hear it when it's teams in your conference. I know USC has, Ohio State kind of has. I'm sure Notre Dame has recently. Michigan has somebody like that in-house. Listen, every school's going to have to do it. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when. It's a
I think
matter
everybody
of when.
has somebody that does some degree of the role, but to how big expansive their job is, and whether they've adapted to what 2025 is up there. And like in some situations, and maybe one of the UW fans out there will know, like I know they just hired an agent to come in for Washington, but he's almost more like the capologist than perceived as a GM. Eventually, you're probably gonna have a GM and a capologist, I think, across the board in a higher level position versus some guy who was like the recruiting guy trying to figure out how to manage $20.5 million for, and what portion of that's going to football.
Stormy Cyclones in the chat. Good to see you, Stormy. Don't let what the ACC does determine what everyone should do. That model is dumb. And I think you just spoke on that.
Well, I wouldn't put it past Jim Phillips to do like a 50-year with an automatic perpetuity renewal for like a 1% increase year-over-year deal. He is Jim Phillips.
Yeah, don't send your Jim Phillips out with the cow to sell the cow. He will come back with magic beans, and they will not sprout a beanstalk. Grand Dan, do you think that UNC is scheming to move? I know UNC is scheming to move.
They're schemers. That's what they do.
Yeah. Listen, you don't.
Shout out to Heath.
Yeah, you don't hire Bill Belichick to coach in the ACC. You hire a guy like Bill Belichick to elevate your program and make it as attractive a candidate as possible for power to inclusion, which I don't think they really needed to do because I think North Carolina is pretty much desired by both the Big Ten and the SEC.
All 300,000 fans of them in football this past year.
But they're in North Carolina. Bob Swanger says, happy birthday. Thank you, Bob. The Big 12 has Denver, Phoenix, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Kansas City, Orlando, Cincinnati, and soon to be New York and Boston. Okay. Big Lubbock believes they are adding UConn. But still, the Big Ten has New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle. We could go on and on. The SEC has, it's where the money is, guys. I agree. Listen, Texas is a rich state. Texas has a Big 12 in it. Texas has the SEC in it. Texas is more than likely going to get a Pac-12 team in it. You've already got, I believe there's 2 G6 conferences that operate already in Texas.
At least.
Very rich. ACC's in Texas now, too, with SMU. So. Stormy Cyclone says, happy birthday, old fart. I'm not that old. Only as old as you feel. Happy birthday, Moan. Thank you. I don't see the Crown Royal bottle yet. Yeah, might be getting a little old. Need a little lubrication for them joints. Here we go. Should have played the song.
Like all the jolly fellows, I drink my whiskey clear. I'm a rambling wreck from Georgia, taking a hell of an engineer.
Hey. Whew. Oh, Wild Ute's in the house. He must have got done recording that members only video. Good to see you, Wild Ute. Thank you for the birthday wishes. Thank you for the birthday wishes, Fergie. Thank you for the birthday wishes, Antoine. The Big 12 also has eastern New Mexico and most of the Texas Panhandle and West Texas to El Paso, sometimes San Antonio and Houston. I'm not denying any of those things. It's just the money is more and the population areas that the Big 10
land isn't people.
Yeah. But by land,
there are people in the land, but the total relative to the size of that is not.
RT says, has anything come out on UConn? I'm guessing they were present for the Redbird presentations. 100%. Here's the thing you got to realize. We don't know if Redbird is the firm that was connected to UConn. We do know there was a firm that was very keen on having UConn included in the conference composition for the Big 12. Don't know that was Redbird. We don't know. A lot of people have been saying, hey, Redbird's based in New York and they've got an office in Connecticut. Okay. But we don't know for certain yet. But we do know that one capital partner, and this has been reported by Greg Flugar, was very keen on having UConn as part of the composition of the Big 12. Mr. Ed Wayner, good evening, gentlemen. Houston is the opposing Big 12 team's problem. Talking about March Madness basketball there.
Soon enough.
West Virginia has a football GM, Chuck Lilly. There you go.
I thought West Virginia was leaving D1.
Yeah,
I just
listen,
want to
guys,
see if people can start that stupidity again.
You see something on X, don't believe it. Of course, I sneak edited that entire video. Texas Tech was one of the first schools with a GM hired when Joey was hired. Grant McCaslin, basketball coach, also hired a basketball GM when he was hired. Yeah, it's wave of the future.
What took so long? My Texas Tech question is, it's like, what took so long? With all that money, the facilities look amazing. I saw that video this week. The portal investments, the making sure your guy didn't go away to Notre Dame. Like, just what took so long? I know it took so long for Miami, right? I'm curious what took so long for Texas Tech because, like, obviously the wherewithal is there and is now happening in a massive way.
Yeah, I think SMU making the playoffs this year, I think that might have moved a few people. James Blanchard, the Texas Tech football GM, turned down Notre Dame twice and USC once. Yeah, because it's good to have money. Got that oil money.
The other version of that is, does he have the same agent as Mike Norvell, who leveraged that he's number one to Alabama to get a raise?
I forget that guy's name. What was that guy's name? He's not just Mike Norvell. He's
multiple.
Dan Lanning was involved
James
in that.
Sexton or something like that.
Yes, there you go. Jimmy Sexton.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer's agent, Mike Norvell's agent, Dan Lanning's agent. Basically, anybody who was up for that Alabama job last year's agent.
Yeah, I mean, look, James Blanchard did an amazing job for Texas Tech in the portal, and they're right to have kept him. But there's nothing better than being a college football coach or a staff member and having other possible suitors around to keep leveraging your contract up, which is why we have so many associate head, assistant head coaches.
Absolutely. Stormy Cyclone says, in honor of the month of March, will there be more madness on the court or off the court? How about in the courts? Will there be more madness in the courts? Or will somebody actually settle down, come to the table, and start negotiating? Fergie asked a great question. Moan and Rock, what is the ideal power football league number? I am convinced it is 48 committed programs.
Yeah, I'm more at 64, and I'll give you my parallel. The best part of I'm not the biggest soccer fan, but I'm not a casual soccer fan either. And in Europe, you have 3 or 4 really good leagues, and the thing I'm most interested in is when the champions come together, right? So to me, and that's basically 4 or 5 leagues that have not counting relegation, X amount of teams in there. So to me, the college football equivalent, because geographically we're pretty sizable as a country, is probably about 64 if they can all really do it without taking anybody out of the mix. That's my number.
I like between 64 and 68. Somewhere in there. I think that's right. That's a sweet spot. I think that's what we'll end up with. I think the ACC is still going to survive in some form or fashion. Who's a member of it? I don't know. Wake Forest is probably still going to be a member of it. Boston College might have to be a member of it. But I think the Big 12 is probably going to swell to 20. Big 10 will swell to 20 or 24. SEC will probably swell to 20. So that's 64 teams.
Yeah, and for however easy when people get past the school and the brand and just talk about a TV ratings thing, for whatever dunks people might want to take on a given school in a given year. This year could be SMU's TV ratings or Wake Forest. They are still fairly high, much higher than most of the G5 schools that are not in one of the P4.
Matt Schnuck says, what's the going rate for these new GM salaries? Happy March. That's a great question. I don't know what the salary is on the guy from Texas Tech, but considering he's been
I'd say 500K to like 1.5 million.
Yeah,
is like a good range.
Yeah, he's been tried to get poached 3 times now. I'm sure he might be the highest paid GM in college football. Not trying to go off topic, but if college football had the March Madness layout, would it work?
Not at 64, right? Because then you're literally taking basically 50% of the schools, right? When you take 64 or 68, as it were, in college basketball, you're taking 68 out of 300 and something, if I'm not mistaken, about the total. So you're taking about 20%, roughly, bad math version, of the schools, not 50%. Like, I think, could you get away with 32, maybe? I mean, there's no extra time between 14, 16, and 18 in the current, 12, 14, and 16. 12, as far as time goes, involves 4 buys, 14 involves 2 buys, 16 involves 0 buys, right? So the time wait, if you go to anything more than that, then you're adding at least a week to it. But if you went to 32 and everybody played, it would just be a week.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to have, are we going to have any regular season at all at that point?
Yeah.
I just think a 64 team, 68 team tournament is too unwieldy in college football. You might get to 16 someday, and I think that's probably the limit you're going to hit. At some point, the regular season has to count for something, And you get like 24, 36. There's going to be weeks where people just sit their entire team and take the loss.
That's
all right,
true.
guys, I'm going to throw the line here in chat if anybody wants to join. Of course, you will not be on screen. We have the media asset here. It is the Mo Intection program. You will be behind the screen. Now, just FYI, some people get on here and scream or yell obscenities. I try and get them off the screen as quick as I can. But there's absolutely no willy waving in here. So
I'd like to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield for my free therapy session this past week to help me try to unsee what we saw.
I also could put up the cheeseburger and just hope the cheeseburger blocks all the shots and makes it a very tasteful thing here. But just an idea. Hey, if you're watching us on Twitter, Rock already said this, but I'll let you know there's 185 people watching us on Twitter. If you're interested in what we're talking about, you like what we're talking about, you want to see more of the stuff we're talking about, head on over to the College Football Mafia channel on YouTube. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It is much appreciated. And it helps us keep the lights on here. And leave a comment. Leave a like on the stream. Those things help too. Illini Ted says, aren't they talking about conference play-in rounds that would be kind of like the first week?
Yeah, it's sort of.
Yeah, but in which format are we talking about, Ted? There's so many formats out there. I don't know which one we're talking about. Only way it would make sense to go past 16 is if there are multiple CFPs, Power 2, Power 3, Power 4, and G6.
Go ahead, Moen.
I like the idea of a G6 only playoff. I'm not going to lie. I do like that. I'm sure there's teams in the G6 that don't like that. I'm sure Oregon State doesn't like that. I'm sure Washington State doesn't like that. I'm sure Boise State does not like that. Tulane, Memphis, USF, some of these teams that might have a chance to actually get into the Power 4 playoff. I don't think that they're going to like it, but I think a G6 playoff is a good idea. But I think that it would be better served to have that G6 playoff. I think the G6 should start the season a couple weeks earlier than the Power Four, and then at the end of the year have a tournament of the G6 to see who would represent the G6 in that Power 3, Power 4 playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't studied it enough, but I do know. I don't know if it's FCS or Division II, but one of those divisions, their playoff is 24.
Yeah. But do they play as many regular season games?
I don't remember their count. Like, I just know at the top line it's 24. Is when I was trying to figure out what the percentage of teams in any sports are actually making the playoffs, and they were still, even at 12, 14, or 16 for FBS, it was still the lowest one of any sport. But it would be curious to go check it out and see the full dynamics of what happens if you get past 16, which I don't think any of us are thinking we get past 16, but just because we have 6 more months of off season to talk about, it could be one of those ones where we're like, this is what happens in another conference. They still play X amount of games. There's this much disparity between the top and bottom, even within, FCS or Division II, whichever one it is, right, relative to each other. Not relative to the big gaps between an Ohio State and a Utah State as an example. It'll be interesting just to check it out and be informed about it.
All right, Stormy Cyclone, you are on the screen. What's up, brother?
How are you guys tonight?
We're doing
Good,
well.
man.
How about yourself?
Well, I just had some business with some people, and I laid down for a nap, and I woke up, so I was a little drowsy when I was chatting there to you guys. That was dumb. It was supposed to be doomed. It was supposed to be is what I was trying to get across there.
Okay.
But it worked both ways. That's a good thing about it, man. The typo still worked because the ACC is dumbed as well as being doomed.
Yeah, I don't want to belittle people on that. I guess I don't know, you know what I mean? Because we've been in the Big 12, had to do whatever it could do to survive. So I can understand what the ACC is trying to do, at this moment
doing
too.
Whatever it can to die. That's what they essentially do. It's a very different situation. You guys tried to glass half full it. ACC has tried to glass half empty it.
I guess there's one question I got. This agreement that the ACC did have to proceed forward with their Florida, I thought was supposed to drop these lawsuits. I guess I'm not understanding. And now all at once, it's like they can proceed forward in a Florida court and stuff. And I guess I misunderstood that. What's your take on that?
They didn't. What was said at the time was that this would theoretically, potentially, there's willingness to negotiate it, but there was no guarantee that that was the case. My just opinion on reading it at the time was that maybe there's some conversations about it, and maybe there was some positive momentum to actually trying to sort it out of court as opposed to being obstinate about it. But until that's there, you wouldn't drop anything in court, because if negotiations ultimately failed, even if there's only a 10% chance of it failing, you still want to have your slot on the docket in court to proceed, till nothing's done until it's done, right? Kind of thing. That's what I talk. What about you, Moen?
Listen, I think there is no coincidence. Florida State had the very positive outcome this week. The Supreme Court said they will not hear the case. The case will remain in Leon County Court, followed in short order by this news leaking by the Big 12. Brett Yormark 100% wanted this information out there. And one of the reasons he wanted it out there was to hurt the ACC. And he wanted to let Florida State and Clemson know very publicly, we're close to a private capital deal. You guys now have all the leverage, or I shouldn't say all the leverage. You have most of the leverage in your legal wranglings with the ACC. So what is the benefit for you to get out now?
I see. I just thought this was all contingent on the ESPN moving forward with the ACC, and then next thing I hear that it's able to proceed in account, and so it's not. I guess we don't know all the details, but I'm just curious on that.
I mean, Stormy, here's my take. I think, and Moen, you guys are both chime in. If more than 3 schools, if any schools voted against, if they had to put anything up for vote at all in terms of the media deal, right? if we didn't hear that somebody voted no by now, then I don't think anybody voted no by now, because we heard instantly when people said no to SMU, California, Cal, and Stanford. So, and I believe the media deal, because it was a certain level needed, there was a vote required there was some vote required at the time. It might not have been in the media deal. It might have been on the brand initiative. And if we didn't hear people saying no to that, then I don't think anybody was like fundamentally against the idea that it could get settled, because that would be the time to vote no and try to make sure that didn't happen until it got settled. But, lots of times I'm old enough to remember that Rick Pitino was going to be the next coach of Miami. And then like Leonard Hamilton leaked it out that was going to happen. The next day he wasn't anymore. So I think that's probably the contingency.
Kind of wish you would have been your coach at this point, the way St. John's is looking, huh?
Yeah, I know. St. John's who I grew up rooting for, like through my mom went to college. So
I'm happy for him.
But
I'm happy for him because I don't know. Was it been since almost the old Big East days, I guess, since they've been this dominant. I mean,
the mid-90s probably.
Yeah. All right. That's all. I want to thank you too, Moen, for your license plate. It looks exactly like the ones I got. And you can tell
Immaculate After Dark yet, so I'll have to upload that one.
And in leaving, you can tell if Immaculate gets on there that I know he's a little jealous, but just tell him that prisoners only make Iowa place on their break, usually of the bathroom variety. Thank you guys for your time, and
Thanks.
have a good night.
Stormy Cyclone. We'll see you around, brother. Thanks for coming on. That was great. All right. Let me get Matt snuck up here. Matt, you are up, brother. What's going on? Are you there, Matt?
I just muted him.
Okay.
I think he was taking a piss, man.
I think Matt got up and walked away from the camera a little bit. Thank
that
you,
was
Matt.
one of those where you're like, hey, guys, turn down the radio in the background.
At least
turn
we
down your volume.
Yeah, at least we just had to hear it. We didn't have to see anything at time. So I will take that.
This show is a pisser.
And I don't get everybody pissed off. Let me see here. Carla Jenkins chimes in, says FCS does 24 teams. They do. I think you just mentioned that. Rock and Rain, I think, and that's 24 teams, 8 get a first round bye. But again, I want to see how many games FCS plays and how much travel does FCS really do. I have to think that their travel is much lighter than some of these bigger conferences.
Other than maybe 1 or 2 games, and when they go up and play to the FBS level or something random like that. More regionality for sure.
Absolutely. Nathan Campbell says, hi, guys. Good to see you, Nathan. Mullen, will Syracuse be a part of the Big 12 because of the New York market? Maybe. Although if you're going to be UConn or you're going to go grab UConn, I think you will ultimately have the New York market at that point. But I think Syracuse is still a good ad. I've talked about it many times. If the Big 12 wants to get into that Northeast corridor, we're talking about how much the Big 10 makes money being in that region. That could be a money boom for the Big 12 too. Get into Pittsburgh, take Pitt, take Virginia Tech, get you into Virginia, take Syracuse, get you upstate New York. You have UConn. It adds a nice little Northeast corridor. Get you to 22.
Syracuse has got a ton of alums down in New York City too.
Yeah.
UConn's a bigger, is a state school, so it has a bigger overall alumni, but they both have great alumni profiles down south. And that's a basketball move, but Syracuse has a better football program than UConn. I don't know if that's really in question.
Absolutely. Dante's Boxing Talk. Good to see you, Dante. 24 teams with all 10 conference champs and 14 at-large bids. He's given up the FCS.
Can somebody
Saying
just
again,
look up for us the amount of regular season games they play per team on average? Is it 10, 11, and 12?
yeah, I would like to know that. Because here's my thinking: these FCS things are much more regional conferences. It's a lot easier to travel for some of these people than if you did that in a power conference. Is a new conference forming in the FBS or FCS still possible? Exclude the Pac-12. I don't know that there's enough schools that you could bring up. I've heard one or two names mentioned of schools that you could possibly bring up: North Dakota State, South Dakota State. There's another one too that's I can't think of it at the moment.
Yeah, I think you can more likely see something like not like shitty ass Big Ten, Pac-12, ACC alliances, but maybe a couple of G5 alliances that actually have something to them. That where you take a couple of marriage of equals relatively in terms of their media rights value, and maybe together they can be packaged up in a different way from private equity just by having greater reach and distribution. I know this is probably a bad example because I don't know the TV deals off of hand, but like if Mac, the Mac and the AAC as like a random example that I don't know actually works, but just something along those lines, or a Mac and a Conference USA. But I don't even know if that would make sense to be a full merger. It might just be like, is there something that could be done on a PE level to like be greater than the sum of the parts if they did it alone? And I don't even know if that's like actually a thing, but I'm just a theory.
Yeah, King J, I don't know, but it's like I mentioned earlier, I would like to see some kind of, I don't even know that a tournament. How about just a ranked matchup of G6 teams at the end of the year? Have whoever the top champion is in the G6 play the lowest ranked champion of another G6, match it up 1-6, 2-3, something like that. Because in addition to getting a better matchup, that could be a way to get a second G6 team into the playoffs. Nathan Campbell says, which of the two big streaming groups that Redburn own? I don't know that they own any streaming group. They're bidding, or they potentially are going to bid on CBS Viacom, which is the parent company of Paramount Plus. Do you think after 2036 the Big 12 will expand with new Pac schools? Good question. I don't think so. I'm trying to think if there's anybody in there that, realistically, if they absolutely wanted to get into the California market, they might make a run at San Diego State.
Yeah, if Boise keeps growing as a city relatively, and they keep kicking ass, if they become the default champion and getting into the playoff every year, but that also gets taken away as the default thing the minute they're not. If they're not dominating a G5 conference. I also think 2036, I have about as good a chance of guessing whether we'll get hit by an asteroid or not as to what I think the Big 12 and Pac will be able to do at this point.
Absolutely. And the thing I think that hurts the Pac more than anything else, Pac Chat Network, is the fact that there would be valuable properties in the ACC. If there's enough valuable properties in the ACC, the Big 12 is going to continue heading east. Better time slots. Those time slots bring value. The Big 12 is going to need a new media deal in 2031, I believe, 2030, 2031. They're probably going to send that out to new partners. There's new people in the market space. You've got Turner Sports. They lost the NBA, so they've got a hole to fill. They may become the exclusive partner of the Big 12. I tend to believe that. A lot of people do. They got Big 12 content now by sub-licensing it from ESPN. I think that's a test run.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is for Pac Chat Network is let's see what happens when and if there is a settlement with Florida State and Clemson in the ACC that brings down a possible exit without going through court to 2031 in an affordable way, right? Because if that's the case, Then like 2030/31 with the conversations happening earlier, that's going to be the reckoning. And I could almost actually, I think it's more likely to get an answer to your question in that 2030 to 2031 slot with like a year or two head start on negotiations than to guess about 2036, because I think it's entirely possible that everything resets massively at that specific time with all 3/maybe 3.5 with the ACC conference deals being either coming up for renegotiation or teams becoming available without litigation. And you will have maybe seen whether, what happens with Boise or San Diego State and like, or Washington State or in Oregon State for all we know.
The Big Lubbock says if the ACC dissolves, the Big 12 will go to 24 schools. ESPN will want to find a home for the schools not getting a Big or SEC invite. I don't know. That dissolves the pool. Is ESPN going to pay the extra money to make sure those schools all make the same amount of money or a little more? Pack Network says, I'm talking schools like Cal and Stanford, perhaps. We all know ACC isn't sustainable for them.
Stanford could be sustainable if they had to play in Europe. They have the money, right? Whether the students want to get on charter planes is a different conversation. Cal definitely is a little bit harder for sure. I think it's overestimated the problems that it is for the football side of the equation. There's creative scheduling that mitigates that to a degree. I think it's obviously brutal for all of their Olympic sports and basketball too.
Here's the problem with Cal and Stanford. I don't know that they would accept a Big 12 invite. I don't know. They might just choose to scrap sports, go independent. I don't know. But like I've said before, I think if Notre Dame's willing to come to the Big 10, I think Stanford is their travel partner. Great intellectual human being there.
Yeah, well, that's like, you know what? I'm sorry. Like, what are you, 13 years old?
He's probably hung like a 13-year-old. Get back to comments. Don't worry, Big Lubbock. I know that probably wasn't you. Cal will come available if the ACC dissolves. Probably. Probably back to the Pac-12 if so. Moen is close to getting it. Keep talking, sir. Other voices aren't carrying any weight. Thank you. Appreciate it, Greg. Much appreciated, sir. Right. Says, good ectopic. Good evening. Two Master thinks it's time to scrap the calls. We're not going to scrap the calls. Listen, we get them off the air as quick as we can. We got the Willie blocker in place.
Yeah, I can handle a lot more of the Willie shit than that last one, though.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll just go in and clip it in the replay. That's what I love to do. All right, we've got another call here from Fergie. Let me get this up for Fergie first. As soon as I can find it. There it is. All right, Fergie, is that you?
Yes, and I will speak like a normal human, and I will ask real questions.
Okay.
And I will say happy birthday to Moen, and it's a pleasure to talk to Rock, because the pure love and animus between Colorado and Miami back in the day was so much fun. Miami showed everyone how to be cool, how to be who they are, and there's no doubt that we're trying to either copy it or just at least put a little bit of shine on it so that we can get the fans. And especially with Warren Sapp in the building, he shows us what it's like. And I know Rock probably remembers some of the fights we had back in the day.
Yeah.
Michael Westbrook was talking about how he kung fu'd somebody and got thrown out of that game. Just great times.
Well, here's the thing. Warren Sapp post-college is, I would say, he's a polarizing figure even within Miami fandom.
Agreed.
There's definitely some people who are not necessarily on the the Warren Sapp train as a post-up player zone, but I know that he's speaks highly of his time up there in Colorado, and he's at least not boring, and I'll take not boring over liking everything someone does or says all the time.
No doubt. I will say that I like to see him growing up and mellowing out and doing what he loves to do. I don't know how he would have passed the Colorado background check 10 years ago, but at least he passed it this time. But no, guys, I mean, my theory about college football, where it's headed, and I love the Big Ten loving its brands and the SEC protecting its brands top to bottom. I don't know that ACC and Big 12 can do that anymore. If we're going to have multiple teams in playoffs, but have the level of play or the level of resources be different, I don't see how that works. I love how Rock was talking about the Premier League and the championship over there, where the 5 to 30, I think there's 30 teams that could qualify for the Champions League. You'll get a Russian team, you'll get a Serbian team, and they're really cute.
Yeah.
I used
you got
to
La
own.
Liga, and you got
Serie A,
Serie A, right? All that kind of stuff. That's what I was alluding to for sure.
Yeah, and now funny story is I used to have a semi-pro soccer team, and we played in the U.S. Open Cup, and our goal was to try to be amateurs and go play an MLS team, and it's a cool thing. It's just not what I think TV will work in the long run. And we've played Miami 8 times. We've never really played Clemson or Florida State enough. But my point is that those games would earn so much value in a TV contract, whereas Colorado's played UCF for the first time this year. Houston only won. Cincinnati, West Virginia. We're not going to crap on the Big 12. We're glad to be back. We're glad to be relevant. I said that we had finally cleared out really bad admin, really inept leadership, and now with everyone on board, the commitment is there. But for a new TV contract that's going to, like Moen said, the Big Ten and ACC have won, and we just got to try to be somewhere close. And I don't know if some of those brands can get us there. And I'm curious to see what happens. I don't know if we're holding up or we're all on board with the private equity. I think we would be, because Yormark loves Prime and wants to try to help us keep him as long as possible. So I don't know. My attitude is be good, be great, get the eyeballs, and try to wave your arms at the Big Ten or the SEC and say, come get us. Because I'd rather be there and be stable than play this 3rd and 4th place game.
I don't disagree with you, Fergie. I think it's better to be a big fish in a little pond sometimes. Right now, Colorado is in the driver's seat in the Big 12 as far as I'm concerned. They're getting the talent. They're getting money rolling in. They have the opportunity to really steer that conference for the next 5-10 years. And with the possibility of that, they can get a little bit bigger in there, get to the playoffs, maybe win a couple playoff games, maybe win a national championship under Coach Prime. They might be the team that breaks through the quickest from the Big 12 against the Power 2.
We definitely, I think, like, it's all in. We used to have boosters that were really big, oil guys and tech guys and military defense guys, and they're all back. And so the money is there. Without that, and with bad leadership, if you guys can remember the female kicker scandal, that really set us back for 10-15 years. We were not allowed to be cool. We got rid of Barnett, and we tried a bunch of different coaches. Now we're committed. If Prime leaves, of course we would have to really be set up infrastructure wise, but a lot of teams in these other places either do or don't have the coach. So we're just going to see what happens. We've already seen leaking of a stadium expansion. I do believe stadium size is going to matter in revenue, because when you look at the teams with the best revenues, they're those monster Big Ten and ACC or SEC with stadium size. And we're only at 53. I think we got to get to 65. That's Miami has an advantage there, even though I have no idea if Rock loves being off campus versus.
I could give a crap. It doesn't matter to me whatsoever. We Miami has is zero overhead for the arena and doesn't, and we pay no rent to play there. And
Nice.
we play in a stadium that like the literal Super Bowl plays in. I don't care. I don't really. Everyone can dunk all they want. Would I love another? I would, of course. Would I love my own stadium? Of course I would. You're not getting a new stadium in the middle of Beverly Hills. Miami's in the middle of Coral Gables. It's like literally never going to happen. The basketball arena, which was built for 10,000, they won't even let us have 10,000 seats in there.
Gotcha.
It's just never going to happen. So I don't fight windmills like I'm Don Quixote.
No, I love that. I would even argue that the Broncos are really kicking around a new, probably $3 billion stadium with the Waltons, and a lot of people here are saying if they build something like that, let's just go play there, even though it's off campus. It would suck to be out of Boulder, but Folsom is a beautiful field, but it is not a great stadium infrastructure wise.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if I'm you guys and I'm not, I would be in the zone of fix your stadium because you have it, like, and make it better, and then take advantage of like Georgia and Georgia Tech. I think played the Mercedes-Benz Dome this year. I don't remember if that was Georgia Tech doing basically that and taking their home game up, or if there was some agreement in the home and home structure of that. But to me, that would be like a great win for you guys if they do build that $3 billion crazy stadium. That you do a game there a year, but you don't want to lose that home field advantage. Like Hard Rock can be amazing for Miami, but it's never quite the same as any of these other things, unless it's a giant game, in which case ask the Notre Dame fans how their 2017 experience was. But that's an exception, and it hasn't been the rule.
Yeah, no, I agree. If it's a just absolute mega game, it would be great to do that, without a doubt. The problem with the stadium is just literally infrastructure. There's like everything underneath it is not good. I can't stand our sidelines, but it is a home field advantage. It is a great place. And one of the things that they're doing for the NIL idea is that Boulder businesses are going to pay essentially a fee, a percentage of revenue on game days to help pay for it. So cool. I love the idea that now that the town is busy again and they're killing it on food and beverage, put a 2% NIL tax / commitment special purpose, and let's get revenue every way possible. So, but great, Mo, and happy birthday. You look like a great hang. Like you probably would be the best guy at the lounge. And Rock, I can't wait till the day we can play Miami again. I would be there in a heartbeat. So have a good night, guys.
All right.
Yeah, man. Before you go, you should check out the Florida State situation. You should look, your questions about your stadium. Just look and see all the background on their renovations of Doak, because I know they had a lot of challenges, but they still managed to do it. So
okay,
or still managing to do it.
Yeah, and our championship center, which is the tunnel that the team comes out of to the side, that was $200 million, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I think right now they're saying $100 million on the west stands. We'd be at 65. We'd be really happy, and that's how it works. So let's go Buffs. See ya.
All right. Thanks, Fergie. Appreciate you. All right. We've got one more person here. What are the odds that this is a normal person, Rock?
I mean, the name's normal.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of times they come in here impersonating people. I'm going to say this. If it's a normal person, we're giving away 5 more memberships. If it's a crazy person.
If you're an ex, come over right now, because there might be
come over.
50-50. We got 50-50 odds here.
I'm a betting man, so we're riding with it. All right, Greg, are you there? Boy, you have to wonder. You got no penis. Why would you go whipping that out there? I mean, it's tiny. Tiny.
I don't even I'm not even sure now. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's the same video.
No, it's the same person. It's the same person. It's clearly the same person. Clearly the same person, Rock.
I mean, the degree of loser you have to be to go onto a channel dominated by guys and want to do that is pretty sad. Like, even like incel basement bro doesn't do that. But you know what? I'm sure next episode we will have a return engagement. You're all should do a super chat donation for Moen for saving your eyes from what we did not get saved from. If I worked for the company that is College Football Mafia right now, I would be going to HR, filing a complaint, because our tech is clearly not dick-proof.
Yeah, the bad news for that young man is he used a very specific pick as his Google pick when he came on here last week. So I know who that young man is. Congratulations, young man. I might have to reach out to some people. All right.
Yeah.
I think that's going to wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could follow that again.
Yeah,
my hot take is go after yourself, bro.
Yeah.
There you go.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank everybody for the birthday wishes. I appreciate it so much.
Essentially, John. Essentially.
Pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. Timothy Green says, "Hey, Moen, I would like to thank you again for what you did for me the other night." No problem, Timothy. No problem, sir. Anytime. You're one of the OGs. We appreciate all you do for us. I want to remind everybody, if you are watching us on Twitter X, make sure you jump over to the YouTube channel and give us a subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. It is much appreciated for myself and Rock and Rant. We will see you guys next Sunday, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Nate is going to have an interview with David McKenzie, the world famous David McKenzie, the lawyer. Yes, the lawyer. They're going to be talking about the ACC, Clemson, and Florida State. That lawsuit, pretty great timing on Bomber's part to get that interview then.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's this whole dynamic of that interview has changed. So for myself and Rock and Rant, we will catch you guys next week. Peace